Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and today I'm going to go over all of my reading stats from 2025, my favorite books of last year, which normally I put in a separate video, but there weren't enough of them to talk about in another video, so I'm just going to put them here, and all of the books I either received or purchased last year and how much I paid for them. 2025 was basically the opposite of 2024. 2024 I read the most books I ever have at 46, and last year I only ended up reading 27. And I recognize that when compared to the average person on the street, reading 27 books is still more than most people, but that's very low for somebody who is a booktuber. I felt a lot of guilt for that. It was something I was struggling with last year because I felt like I am a content creator, I'm somebody that says that I love reading books, and I just wasn't reading enough books to satisfy me or to feel like I had even a right to say that I love to read. And I do think that that's a hard part about when you become a booktuber or you start saying that you really enjoy something, is it's natural for you to either compare yourself to other people or other people to compare their reading habits to you. The fact that I started out last year reading books that really didn't bring me joy and I wasn't really inspired to read, I think messed up a lot of my year. It kind of put me in a slump from the very beginning. And then I ended up putting my attention when I was home or trying to decompress from work into other things like video games. So I recognize that reading is not my only hobby. It's still one that I'm very passionate about, and hopefully in the coming year I will end up reading more. In reading those 27 books, I read 10,175 pages and I was averaging 28 pages a day. It took me about 13 and a half days on average to finish a book, and each book was about 377 pages in length. The longest book that I read was The Count of Monte Cristo at 1,312 pages, and the shortest book that I read was Bunnicula at 98 pages. If you look at books and pages read per month, you can see I was wildly oscillating every single month over the course of the year and only read usually between 1 and 3 books a month. The one part of my stats that I'm kind of raging against a little bit is the fact that my average star rating was 4 stars. I do not feel that it should be that high. The last 3 books that I read at the end of the year were 4.5 stars, and I know that those 3 drove up my average. But when I sit back and I think about what I read in 2025, I don't feel like I enjoyed nearly enough of the books that I read. Like, I thought that maybe they were okay, or they're ones that I was like, I'm fine with it, but I didn't actively really take pleasure in reading them. And you'll be able to tell by my graph that quite a few of them were below 4 stars. So yes, because of the math, I accept it is a 4-star rating. I at best feel that 2025 is like a 3.8. And now I'm going to list all 27 of the books that I read in the order that I read them. Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, The Illustrated Eric by Terry Pratchett, Bunnicula by Deborah and James Howe, The Terror by Dan Simmons, The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton, Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks, The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell, A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst, The Martian by Ian D. Weir, Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, Sandman Slim by Richard Kadri, Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, Moving Pictures by Terry Pratchett, Alien Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky, Deacon King Kong by James McBride, The Dark Tower by Stephen King, Neopets the Omelette Fairy by Rebecca Mix, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell, The Woman in the Library by Solari Gentile, Neopets the Discarded Magical Blue Grundo Plushie of Prosperity by Rebecca Mix, The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King, Slewfoot by Brom, A Man Called Uva by Frederick Bachman, and No Exit by Taylor Adams. And now I'm going to go through my genre breakdown for the year, and I definitely feel like I read more widely than last year because I had a larger spread of genres that I don't typically read from, but that also ended up impacting some of the genres that I typically like to read more of. So I'll get into that in just a minute. I will also say that when I did the breakdown, many books, as you know, end up falling into multiple genre categories. I picked the ones that I felt were the most appropriate. You might disagree with that. and that's perfectly fine. Horror and fantasy were my top 2 genres last year at reading 5 books each. That's really not a surprise because those two end up being 2 of the top 3 genres that I typically read from. The third is usually sci-fi, and that's the one that I really want to talk about for a second. Early on in my channel, what most people ended up engaging with me on were the sci-fi books that I was reading. I would say that that was the bulk of the content that I was producing were reviews for sci-fi books, and then I kind of moved into reviews of horror books as well. I love science fiction very much, and I know that the people who subscribed to me were people who predominantly read sci-fi. I think it both hurt me and hurt my channel that I stopped engaging with science fiction as much, because then I felt like I really just didn't have much that I wanted to talk about in terms of individual reviews. I wasn't really that interested in creating content about the books that I was reading because the number of genres I was reading from was just so diverse, and I just didn't feel like it would appeal to a lot of people. And I kind of wonder if I were to get back into reading science fiction, if it would kind of give me that motivation to start creating content again. I don't know for certain if that would be the case, but it's possible. I think it's amazing to read widely. I think everybody should read books that gets them out of their comfort zone. That's one of the reasons why Kat and I, when we do our book club every year, we end up picking 6 books from basically 6 different genres because we want there to be something for everyone. But if there are things that you typically like to read, that can be hard on you, because always branching out of your comfort zone means that you're not engaging with the stuff that you otherwise might want to. So there are trade-offs, you know, that's the opportunity cost. It's just something to keep in mind. So equally with sci-fi, at 3 books, I ended up reading historical fiction and middle grade. From there, I read 2 mystery books and 1 thriller book, 1 romantasy, which is very much not the genre that I typically engage with. That was one of Kat and I's book club picks. 1 literary fiction, 1 dystopian, 1 classic, which I also never read, that was The Count of Monte Cristo, and 1 nonfiction, which I had in prior years been trying to read more of, so it's also kind of surprising that I only read 1 nonfiction book for the whole year. Now I'm going to talk about one of my favorite things that I track every year, which is how many books I got and how much I paid for them. I think it's really important in this hyper-consumeristic overconsumption culture of Booktube and Book Talk that we are cognizant of the books that we're buying versus how many of them that we're reading, because I definitely always fell into the category, and I would argue I still fall into the category of getting more books than I read. This year though was the best that I've had in any time that I can remember. So starting off for the book club books that Kat and I had, which were The Winter People, Deacon King Kong, and The Woman in the Library, I ended up spending a total of $33.26. I then got The Bones Beneath My Skin and The Teller of Small Fortunes for $17.11. The Year of Wonders was a gift from Keaton for my birthday. I then got a day hiking book that explains good day hikes for around you. I'm not going to show you the cover of that because it would tell you where I live, but I ended up getting that for $13.86. I got Cloud Cuckoo Land for free with a gift card that I also got for my birthday. I got the book March for $15.66. Sandman Slim was given to me as a gift for my birthday. These next 5 books that I'm going to mention are really important for my stats for 2025 because they were 39% of my total amount of money that I spent for the year on just 5 books, because I bought them on the bookshop.org, which supports independent local bookstores, and you end up paying more money from local bookstores than you would from someplace like Amazon because they're not highly discounting them. I'm happy that I bought them from a bookstore, you know, and was able to support somebody locally. It is hard though to imagine that 5 books was $107.11, and those were for Service Model, The Tainted Cup, Alien Clay, Someone You Can Build a Nest In, and A Sorceress Comes to Call. I did a reading program through my library last year and won a free book, which was The Perfect Couple. I got The Drawing of Three used for $6.75. These next 5 books were all gifted to me by Kat from Kat's Novel Adventures, and that was 100 Hair-Raising Horror Stories, Ring Shout, Never Let Me Go, The Lovely Bones, and Room. I had a couple book of the month credits because I have been skipping a lot of books recently because I've been trying not to get books as much as possible, but one of them ended up being our book club pick for 2026, so I went ahead and got it, and that was Dark Sisters. And then I got the book club winner last year from book of the month, and that was The God of the Woods, and so I got those for $36. I am continuing in my Discworld journey, and I needed the next book in the series, which was Reaper Man, and I got that used on eBay for $14.26. These next two that I bought are because I'm a deeply nostalgic person and I still love Neopets. I'm one of those weird people that I still think Neopets is really cool. That was something from my childhood. If you're like, I have no idea what the hell that is or what, just don't even worry about it. They were comics that were created for people who get all the inside jokes about the game. That's really all I can say. But I ended up getting the Neopets, the Omelet Fairy, and Neopets, the discarded magical blue Grundo plushie of Prosperity for $25.60. I was gifted the Carpet Makers by one of my subscribers, Heidi, and I got a signed copy of In the Lives of Puppets from Keaton for Christmas. And the last book that I got last year was to prepare for Kat and I to continue in our Dark Tower series, which we're going to be doing this month, and the next book is The Wastelands, and I got that used on eBay for $6.47. So that means, in total, for the year of 2025, I spent $276.08. I got 30 books in total, and 12 of them were given either as gifts or I got for free. And I honestly think that was the least amount of money that I have spent on books since I was in college, so pat on the back for me for that. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this video were my top 5-star reads for last year. There were only 5 of them. Yes, normally that could warrant its own video. You're going to see very quickly why that is not the case this year. My top 5-star reads were The Illustrated Eric by Terry Pratchett, Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks, A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, and Neopets, the discarded magical blue Grundo plushie of Prosperity. I have said that 3 times in this video and somehow managed to not fuck it up. Like, goddamn. I would never, ever, ever in a million years tell you to read this. It's amazing. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was super fun because I get it. But there's a lot of inside jokes. So like, why would I tell you to read this when you have no idea what the heck the jokes are unless you're already a fan? So that one gets excluded. Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield got its whole own video on my channel. You can go watch that. I'll link it here. I gave a very in-depth, spoiler-free review and explanation of why you should read this book. It's amazing and fantastic. It is a horror novel that follows 2 women. One of them ends up going out into the sea and disappears for months on end, and her wife that is back on land has no idea what happened to her. Her wife eventually returns from out on her expedition, but she comes home changed, and they're trying to figure out how to live their lives together again. Super impactful for me. I would recommend that everybody read it. Go watch this other video. Okay, I'm not going to talk much about this in this video, which means it leaves 3 books for me to talk about with you that were 5-star reads. And honestly, a lot of the 4.5s that I normally talk about in one of these kinds of videos, I don't even really want to talk about because some of them I look at and I'm like, should that even be a 4.5? Or should it be closer to a 4? Again, my reading year in 2025 was not really super enjoyable, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that I loved these. So these are the ones that I want to talk about. Starting off with The Illustrated Eric by Terry Pratchett. This is the shortest Discworld novel. This is part of the Discworld series. I love this. I got this at Powell's City of Books when I went there. That's in Portland, Oregon. And it's just got some amazing old illustrations. This is from the original art style when all of the books first came out. All of the covers and everything all had this style art. They don't publish those anymore, so it's really cool to see that today. Eric is a Faustian story, so if you're not familiar with Faust, it's when somebody makes a pact with the devil in order to receive some type of wish, right? Eric ends up summoning what he thinks is a demon. It turns out to be Rincewind the wizard, and Rincewind is basically attached to him kind of like a magical genie, and Eric asks for 3 things. Eric's 3 wishes are that he will be the ruler of the world, they'll have the most beautiful woman ever, and that he will live forever. So So naturally, like with any kind of genie or Faustian tale, it's not going to go exactly the way that he thinks it's going to, and a lot of hilarity ensues. I thought that this was just so well done, and as somebody who was not really familiar with Faustian tales, I thought that this was a great way to be introduced to it because it was really funny. Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks is my first Geraldine Brooks, and I can guarantee you that I will be reading more of her in the future. And just in case you have never heard of Year of Wonders, this is a story that takes place in 1666 in a little village that ends up getting infected by the plague. And the preacher of the town ends up saying, hey, we're going to shut off our borders to the outside world. Nobody is allowed to leave. Nobody's allowed to come in. We are going to contain the plague here because we want everybody in the surrounding areas to be safe. What is really astounding about this story is it's loosely based off of a real life event. So there was a village that actually did shut its borders. They did try to contain the plague, and somehow just knowing that feels even more emotionally impactful, even though these characters didn't exist in real life. The way that Geraldine Brooks was able to set a scene and convey the complicated emotions of these characters was absolutely masterful. The story was always moving, it never felt stale, even amongst all of the death. You have this kind of mystery from the beginning of the book, which takes place kind of into the plague a ways, where you see that the pastor of the town, who used to be this man with a lot of vim and vigor, has deteriorated substantially, and so you're kind of jumping back and forth in the story between they're fully in the plague and the beginning of it, and you're wondering how he got that way. It's absolutely crazy what happens in this book, and I would recommend it to absolutely everyone if you are a fan of historical fiction. And last but certainly not least, actually so not the least, that I would argue that this might be my top book that I read overall in 2025, and that was A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. So this is the one nonfiction book that I read. Bill Bryson ended up going out with a friend to hike the Appalachian Trail, and he documents his adventures of hiking, especially because he and his buddy were not at all seasoned veterans. They didn't train at all. They didn't have the right equipment. They had absolutely no idea what they were doing, and so they were kind of just bumbling along and figuring it out throughout the journey. What I love so much about this book is the stark contrast between the parts of the book that are really funny and biting and just critical in all of the best ways, and the parts that really actively make you upset, you know, talking about the environmental side, about the government's role in maintaining the Appalachian Trail, what's happening to the ecosystem around the people who hike it every year. This, in my opinion, is basically the perfect nonfiction book. Now, is it entirely up to date? No. As I'm sitting here, I don't remember exactly when this was published. 1998. So we're a little bit removed, right? We're getting to the point where it's almost been 30 years since this was written. I recognize that there are going to be some things that have changed since then, but this was a great snapshot in time. And what was really cool too was that Bill Bryson and his buddy struggled so much trying to hike the Appalachian Trail that they didn't actually end up fully succeeding, but they went back years later to hike the parts of it that they never finished. So that part of it was just really awesome as well. And those were all of my reading stats of 2025. I apologize for the lighting. I was trying to get all of this done while the sun was still in my favor. That did not end up working out because it was a deeply overcast day. So sorry if the lighting looks like crap, but thank you very much for watching all the way until the end. And hopefully 2026 will be an even better year for reading for all of us. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.